Yeah. Oh, woo. Okay. Now you can all hear me. So we are not just punctual, but we are ahead of the curve with everything here. So we are going to start a few minutes early because we do realize that, of course, it's 7 p.m. and it's been a long day, but we still want to keep your energy fresh so that we can have a good conversation. So good afternoon to all of you and welcome to our session today. The sustainable transition is urban, how cities are making net zero resilient, people-centered future happen. My name is Giorgia Rambelli. I'm the director of the Urban Transitions Mission on Mission Innovation. It will be my great pleasure to moderate this distinguished panel that I'm about to introduce to all of you today. This session is co-organized by the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy and the Urban Transition Mission. And just to set the scene, a few reminders on why we are here to discuss about transition to net zero, resilient and inclusive future. So climate science, and I don't want to spoil any more about that because soon we will hear directly from a colleague from the IPCC, but it's showing us that the world is off track, unfortunately, from the goals of the Paris Agreement. And at the current rate, we are moving towards a dangerous and unstable future of 2.8 degrees of global heating compared with the pre-industrial era. It's, of course, a very sobering statistic and a clear message that we must keep up the work, but we also should try to make deep civilization-wide changes by 2030 to ensure that our vision of a more sustainable future can continue. In some cases, this is not just a matter of having a target, as you know, but we feel increasingly the heat across the world, and it's a matter of survivals for a lot of our most at-risk communities across the world. So climate change impacts are, of course, not only affecting everyone individually, but are particularly amplified at the local level in cities, in towns, and in regions that continue to be and find themselves at the forefront in responding to climate change. Yet, it is impossible for them to tackle these challenges alone. So partnership across sector, and this is something that we want to discuss today, as well as looking into simultaneous transition, holistic planning, are essential to make sure that we can create the responses that are needed. But there are some very good news. And the first one that I want to share with you is that this global trend of urbanization can also offer a critical opportunity to advance low carbon and climate resilient development, and that there are already options, innovation, technologies available across sector to really help us halve emissions as quickly as possible. The other great news is that there are already 13,500 cities across the world, the signatories of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, that have already committed to emission reductions target, but also to implement ambitious measures for resilience and energy access. Out of those, there are 100 cities that are part of the Urban Transition Mission that I have the pleasure to represent. 100 cities, 2 of them will be on the panel with us today, from 43 countries across the world that have already joined this process and have already joined like-minded communities to really push forward and work together, exchange, learn, test new solutions to turn their communities into net zero resilient and inclusive communities. So to paint a picture for you, because I think a picture speaks more than 1,000 words, based on the targets that these cities have already set compared to a business as usual scenario, the cohort of the Urban Transition Mission could collectively reduce greenhouse gas emission by more than 500 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent annually by 2050. And this is roughly the equivalent to the carbon footprint of 1.1 million round-trip economy class flights between Buenos Aires in Argentina and Amman in Jordan, both of them, of course, Urban Transition Mission City. So this is just the beginning, and we're talking about these 100 cities, but we are looking to welcome at least 100 more in the upcoming years. So watch that space. We are coming for more opportunities to increase our cohort and to increase the impact that we can bring forward together. I mentioned already how cities cannot do these transitions alone. Greater knowledge, capacity, financing are needed to boost these transitions. And there are priority gaps that still persist today, and they span between the ability of creating and informing systemic urban action to importance of implementing effective multi-level governance, and of course, the possibility of leverage solution like digital solution, among others, that really require cross-sectoral commitments, but also collaboration, and most of all, systemic transformation. So with this as a backdrop, and building upon the conversation that had been happening in some of the most important fora, like Innovate for Cities, for example, in earlier this year, we want to understand how can we offer an opportunity for cities to understand where the gaps are in innovation, how can innovation, research support this community in their ambition to become climate neutral and also resilient and inclusive, how can we create a platform for them to exchange with the private sector across level, and making sure that there can be a discussion around cutting-edge solutions to reach net zero resilient futures together. So these are some of the opportunities that we will try to explore today, and we will discuss why and how cities are essential drivers of climate action innovation, the role of potential systemic cross-sectoral approaches to accelerate the uptake of the existing solution and the creation of new one, and to showcase more than anything else how cities are leading across the globe and how they are also trying to comply with the tasks that they have at hand, but also to tackle priority challenges that are identified on their way. So with all of this, it is now my pleasure to give the floor for setting the scene to Andy Deacon. He is the Managing Director of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Andy, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us today. Oh, sorry, I'm spoiling the suspense here.
That's all right. Nobody needs to look at my face that long. Okay, then thank you, Giorgia. Thank you to our wonderful Urban Transitions Mission co-leads. Very happy to also be working alongside the European Commission's Directorate General for Research, Technology and Deployment, and partners also from Austria, then in co-leading this important mission globally as part of Mission Innovation, but want to bring some perspectives from the Global Covenant of Mayors angle, and then loop back around to talking about how we kind of conceived of the Urban Transitions Mission, and a little bit of the journey that we've been on with Giorgia and the UTM team and our wonderful kind of cohort of supporting national governments and Innovation Alliance partners since then. So as you heard, originally back in 2018, the then Mayor of Edmonton convened a group of policymakers and scientists in the city of Edmonton in Canada to try to identify where research gaps were and how this urban and climate science agenda was evolving. And that conference resulted in something called the Edmonton Declaration. And ever since then, GCoM has worked with partners from UN Habitat and more broadly across academic, civil society and private sectors every few years to convene a gathering called Innovate for Cities. We held the last but one version in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, was entirely virtual, but attracted around 5,000 participants. And then the most recent version this autumn in September in Montreal, Canada. And what this resulted in, both of those last two iterations of the conference, is something called the Global Research and Action Agenda on Cities and Climate Science, or the GRAA for short. And as you'll see here, a little bit about how that was put together and how it is trying to drive things forward. So it drew together findings and outcomes from the inputs of more than 2,000 participants, over 200 sessions at the conference, which was hosted in person, but with some kind of broadcast and hybrid participation, co-convened by GCoM and UN Habitat this autumn, and resulted, as you'll see in the document that you see on the right there, which identifies how we might accelerate next generation city climate action, this new global research and action agenda. And that was launched at the World Urban Forum just a couple of weeks ago in Cairo in Egypt, again, jointly with our UN Habitat partners. And it identifies knowledge gaps, action priorities, and makes a set of recommendations across multiple areas, from building in particular considerations about urban resilience, to incorporating informality into some of our decision making on research, to other considerations about how we truly draw together mitigation and adaptation to get to climate resilient development pathways that are able to integrate both. And the Urban Transitions Mission has been drawing on this work as part of a process to set out some road mapping and a guide for the cohort of UTM cities that's growing all of the time. So it's very much designed to identify cross-sectoral approaches and importantly, in the context of some of the other things that we've been talking about earlier today on Urbanisation Day here at COP29, also the multi-level governance insights to bring local, regional and national governments together and to link that together with international or multilateral processes like mission innovation, the Clean Energy Ministerial, the COP process and others. So it tries to be the glue and provide the framework that can then help any actor locate themselves within that city climate research innovation ecosystem and help cities then identify the way ahead. So in addition to that framework, and I encourage you to go to the globalcovenantofmayors.org website and take a look where you'll find it in the news section of the website. Then we also published 3 other things, and they're very small, but you can try the QR codes that are on the slide. From left to right, there was a recognition, including from the team from the City of Montreal themselves, that it was right to call on national governments to think about providing additional research funding into this agenda. And that's exactly what the Urban Transitions Mission has been trying to support as well, where they're available, drawing on research programs and filling those gaps in what the cohort of UTM cities have been telling us is required. Secondly, a climate innovation readiness navigator tool that we're now taking forward and piloting in 2025 in Australia with the University of Melbourne and in Canada with Concordia University in Montreal. And again, it provides a tool at local level to identify where there are the greatest opportunities to deploy innovations. And again, that's something that the UTM cities are also taking a similar approach to. And then thirdly, we recognize that there are huge opportunities from the way that artificial intelligence is developing, both to plug data gaps, to think about how AI has a role to play in urban systems, everything from energy grid management to other approaches. And so we held a City Climate Action hackathon and got a number of effectively pitching teams to come together and compete effectively for a prize of some mentorship through 2025. And the winning project team being mentored by partners, again in Canada, but with a focus on identifying climate resilience and adaptation needs in Brazil. And you can read more about that and find some more information on the slide there. So that's that agenda. The UTM cities have then been taking all of this information and using that, as well as specific bespoke support from a team that the Global Covenant of Mayors has helped to convene and support, but is really looking for those cities, who are reasonably advanced in their thinking about pathways to climate neutrality and net zero to help uplift their ambition and to have a sufficient cohort of them exchanging between themselves on the positive techniques and outcomes, and exchanging best practices, but also to identify where we could link them to private sector partnerships, to innovative financing, to then help move things forward. So I hope that helps set the agenda a little, helps you understand why the Global Covenant of Mayors is engaged in the Urban Transitions mission. It's expanding all of the time. We look forward to entering into a new phase of activity from the beginning of next year, and very excited about where all of this is heading in terms of increasing that urban climate ambition, which would be my key takeaway message here on Urbanization Day at COP. Thanks, Giorgia.
Thank you very much, Andy, for setting the scene, giving us this vision of ambition, and also showing us how this partnership that I was calling for just a few minutes ago is already taking place with research, academia, and of course practitioners coming together to understand how to bridge the gaps that are existing and unfortunately ever evolving, but also giving us opportunities, of course, to look into new ways to find solutions. So I promised you that we're going to have a great lineup of speakers, and it's now the time to invite them to join me on stage. So I would like to invite first and foremost Siir, she's Vice Chair of the Working Group 3 at the International Panel on Climate Change. Hello, Siir, thank you very much for being with us. Please have a seat. It's my pleasure to welcome on stage Manuel Araujo. He's the mayor of the city of Qaelimane in Mozambique. Mayor, thank you for joining us. It's my great pleasure also to welcome on stage Sayyara Musayeva. She's the deputy mayor of Sheki here in Azerbaijan. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for the wonderful hospitality that Azerbaijan has been giving us until now. Connecting online with us, Birgit Ahlers. She's the global lead of geo-sustainability at Google. Thank you for being with us, Birgit. And last but by no means the least, I'm happy to welcome here on stage Taila Sherrard. She's the Regional Director for Strategic Sales and Marketing at Fugro. Thank you very much for being with us, Taila. And I'm going to take a seat on the comfy chair together with you.
Thank you very much, Giorgia. It's a pleasure to be here, and urban areas provide key opportunities for ambitious mitigation effort that contributes to sustainable development, and therefore sustainable transition is urban. So with that, let me go to my slides to share some key findings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, first of all, that urban areas are responsible for 29 gigaton of CO2 equivalent of consumption-based emissions in 2020. And at the same time, they are providing the opportunities to address this and help the world mitigate climate change. Looking into the key findings from the Working Group 3 perspective, the mitigation of climate change, urban areas are providing opportunities to increase resource efficiency and significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the systemic transition of infrastructure in urban form in low-emission development pathways towards net zero emissions. So the cross-sectoral systemic transition is emphasized directly in this key statement from the summary for policymakers coming from the report. And there are three broad strategy areas for ambitious mitigation efforts for established, rapidly growing, and emerging cities. These are reducing or changing urban energy and material use, including through compact and efficient urban forms and supporting infrastructure, electrification in combination with switching to low-carbon energy sources, and enhancing carbon uptake and storage in the natural urban environment. And when we look at urban form, this can be either compact and walkable or dispersed and autocentric. When urban form is compact and walkable, this has many co-benefits, including co-located jobs and housing, health, lower resource demand, and saving land for agriculture, forestry, and other land use, which is important also for food security. And when we look at urban areas, these are systems, cross-sectoral systems, bring together land use, transportation, buildings, energy. And what is done in one layer impacts the other. So for example, providing accessibility to public transport or options for active mobility, and also choices for the co-location. When we look at better urban planning, this has an important energy reduction potential, 20-25%, while providing better service provisioning. Electrification, also a very important mitigation strategy, and combining this with decarbonized electricity supply raises the potential to about 75% of the total. And urban areas are also systems connected to other urban areas in the region, the world, also agriculture, forestry, and land use through the materials. So the full potential for reducing consumption-based urban emissions to net zero greenhouse gas emissions also is possible when the emissions beyond the city's administrative boundaries are addressed. And from all of this, we can say that urban areas are systems where multiple mitigation options, especially when integrated, have cascading effects across transport, energy, buildings, land use, and behavior. The evaluation of the urban mitigation options with sustainable development goals also provides many synergy potentials with the sustainable development goals. And the trade-offs, they can be managed and planned for to be managed. And the synergy potential is greatest when urban areas integrate sectors, strategies, and innovations in the context of sustainable development. For example, measures promoting walkable urban areas combined with electrification and renewable energy can create health co-benefits from cleaner air and benefits from enhanced mobility. And urban areas are places where also addressing poverty, reducing hunger, providing access to clean water and clean energy at the same time as tackling climate change is possible. When we come to the outline of the IPCC special report on climate change in cities that is scheduled for early 2027, it will be delivered at that time, we see that the chapters are navigating the topics of cities in a changing climate, trends, challenges, and opportunities, actions and solutions to reduce urban risks and emissions, how to facilitate and accelerate change, and solutions by city types and regions. Coming to the Innovate for Cities, we see that this is a real synthesis of key findings. It is taking the key findings from the urban systems in the sixth assessment report of the IPCC, the summary for urban policymakers that was co-produced by local authorities, the agreed outline of the IPCC special report in climate change and cities, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals framework. And I'm particularly glad to see the elevation of the importance of urban planning and design, the importance of integrating solutions and creating the synergies, and also transitioning towards the sustainable urban systems. I look forward to the rest of this panel and to really emphasize the action for net zero, resilient, and people-centered cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing these insights and the results of your analysis. And now we heard a lot about what needs to be done, what the potential is, and a clear message around these integrated approaches. So, Mayor Araujo, I'd like to go to you because, of course, this is a very tall order, right? I think you just have to. This is a very tall order. And how do you decide in your vision to become net zero climate resilience, what project to prioritize? This is a long-term strategy. They will require time, they will require investment. How do you make sure that you can prioritize, though, although it might be very difficult from a political, even commitment point of view?
Well, unfortunately, politics is about taking decisions. I mean, you cannot be a politician and be decision-making averse person. So that's when you engage into politics, you know from the outset that you will have to take the decisions. Some decisions will be good, other ones will be bad. Some decisions will be perceived by the majority as being right, but others will be. Some decisions will hurt some people and will please other people. So the heart of the game is to persuade people that the decisions that you are taking are meant for better their lives or their well-being. Of course, the idea normal I use is like, my job is to try to maximize happiness while minimizing suffering for the majority of the people who chose me to take decisions on their behalf. So the secret again is always to make sure that you are not concentrating only on the long-term decisions, because people most of the time, they're not prepared to bear or to pay the price for long-term projects. People want quick results. And you need to balance, to find ways of, while you are pleasing people with short-term gains, you also take those long-term decisions. So again, the secret is to make sure that while people need to bear the suffering for the long, or that they need to pay the price for the long-time project, you need to be able of identifying the benefits of short-term decisions and projects. And how do you make that decision? I think that's the 1 million question. But you need to have the perception, you need to have the imagination to be able of, while pursuing a long-term strategy, but to find what is called quick wins, so that to please the citizens you are leading, and to maintain them engaged in the long vision project that you are trying to implement.
And can you give us a couple of examples of how you're doing that locally to improve and the quality of life, but also to reach this objective that we've been talking about?
Definitely. For example, waste management. You cannot say, well, I've got a long-term vision, so I cannot clean your city, okay? You need to make sure that the city is clean. And by taking that short-term decisions, of course, on the other hand, you are able of pleasing them because they are happy, because they are living on a very clean environment while you are pursuing a long-term agenda. A second one, for example, my city, 60% of the income to more than 50% of the citizens, it comes from fishing. So, but people, because they are poor, they cut mangroves. And they cut mangroves for two main reasons. One, for cooking, and the other reason is to build their houses. So they need the mangroves for these short-term benefits, if we may call it. But at the same time, while they are cutting the mangrove to satisfy their immediate needs, they are depleting the ecosystem. Actually, in the long run, they are creating negative impact to themselves, because if you cut the mangroves, fish and other crustaceans, they will not be able of reproducing themselves, and therefore they will not, the citizen of my municipality will not at the hand be able of fishing, and it will affect their income. So you need to balance them. You need to explain to them the importance of the mangroves. But the question there is very simple. You need to get alternatives. Either you need to show them, look, don't cut the mangroves, because in the long run, it will prejudice your income and your way of living. But you need to give them quick wins, like alternatives, because they will ask, so if we don't cut the mangroves, how can we build our houses? What we did, we partners with World Vision and UN Habitat, and we came up with what we call resilient houses using local materials, but mangroves. So like we gave them a way out to go, so that while they are building their house using these materials, they will stop cutting the mangroves. Like for cooking, we created small local projects, for example, in transforming waste into biogas, and then they can use that biogas for cooking, therefore not cutting the mangroves. I mean, like, these are the ways that we found to balance, because when I was campaigning for them to stop cutting the mangroves, they came to me, like, in one of those meetings, and they asked me, because they're not, that's stupid, as people may think. They're like, Mayor, why are you so worried with the mangroves instead of worrying with our well-being? And their question was very simple. Mayor, do mangroves vote? Because, of course, they know that, politicians, they like being re-elected, and therefore they were trying to push me into the area that I will feel uncomfortable. Of course, my answer was, yes, mangroves vote. And they asked me, can you explain us, how do they vote? And I told them, look, if you deplete the mangroves, tomorrow you will not have enough fish, which will affect then your income, Therefore, in the next election, you are not going to vote for me because your level of livelihood will get affected, and you will intuitively think that, well, it's because of the mayor's bad decisions. So if you do not cut the mangroves, then your livelihood will improve. Therefore, by doing that, mangroves indirectly, of course, they do vote.
Thank you so much for sharing this very practical example of how we can bring together low-hanging fruit, short-term decisions and action with bigger, larger visions, and how political commitment is essential to make sure that this is furthering the vision that we have. And I know, Mayor, you have to leave very soon, so I would like to invite everyone to give a big round of applause to Mayor Araujo. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. I would like then to continue this conversation, and Deputy Mayor Musayeva, I would like to ask to you the same question, really. How do you prioritize which low-hanging fruit you want to pursue, which long-term decision you want to take, and can you share with us some examples of how you're doing that in your community of Sheki?
First of all, welcome to my country. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I represent Sheki, where history and sustainability coexist. Our historic center, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, requires careful consideration as we implement climate solution. We are working to balance preservation and progress. Our approach balances short-term wins and long-term projects. Thank you. I want to talk about some examples. First is integrated planning. Our Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan, how we call SICAP, guides decision-making and aligning immediate action with long-term projects and goals. And it's real compass for us. Second one is quick wins. We have planted 12,000 trees and organized energy education days, enhancing public engagement and combating urban heat. Strategic investment. We are expanding our small hydropower plant capacity, already increased by 0.58 kilowatt through EU and Norwegian grants. Climate resilience. We have conducted river embankment works to mitigate flood risks. Sustainable tourism. We are balancing economic development with environmental protection through ecotourism. And water conservation. We are improving park irrigation system to save drinking water under the Mountains Adapt project, which is UNEP. And cultural heritage. We are restoring an old water mill for sustainable halva production, integrated tradition with sustainability. By the way, Sheki halva is famous sweet in Azerbaijan. That's why we want to contribute also. Maybe you can be my guest in Sheki. And partnership with UTM, Covenant of Mayors, Climate Gap Fund, UNDP, UNEP have accelerated our initiatives and fostered global collaboration. While we aim for immediate and lasting change, challenges remain in quantifying long-term benefit and fully engaging citizens and competing priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the priorities that Sheki has with us, and in particular also for underlying how again, there is no one solution that can stand on its own. All the actions that you talked about have to bring together different co-benefits that you're bringing to the overall strategy, but also different measures that have to be integrated with one another. And thinking about that, of course, having the right information to be able to make the right decision and the data that might be helpful to back this type of process and policy development is essential. So I'd like to go online now to Birgit, who is connecting with us, Birgit Ahlers. Just checking if Birgit can hear us. I'm looking at the colleagues over there. Oh, there is a connection problem. Okay, well, then I'll stay here. Talia, I'm sorry. um, so there are a lot of data-driven solutions that we are exploring exactly to provide policymakers, urban planners with this type of information that is needed for this type of action. So there are also a lot of different cutting-edge solutions, IoT, for example, but also increasingly artificial intelligence solutions that really can help somehow to enhance local decarbonization processes and resilience. Yet, the access to this particular tool remains somehow difficult for a lot of our communities. And I'm not just talking about developing economies or emerging economies, but even smaller and medium-sized municipalities across the world. So what new solutions and new innovation that you have seen do you think they will become increasingly a game changer when it comes to supporting urban transition? And how do you think that they are specifically positioned in this larger picture of having this integrated sustainable development for our communities?
Okay, hopefully this is working. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to be talking about this, and I'm going to try and keep it short and to the point because I could talk about this for a long time. For those of you in the room who are not familiar with Fugro, we are a geodata company. We're a multinational company that operates in over 60 countries around the world, and we collect data about the Earth. So that's the natural and the built environment. We're often the first ones on site, pre-construction, and we go throughout an entire project lifecycle to understand how the built environment is performing, but also how it interacts with the natural environment. And we can do anything from the most remote sites in the world through to the deepest parts of our ocean. So really our speciality is data, collecting it, analyzing it, and being able to work with, I like to say partners, not clients, because it really is understanding the challenges and making it fit for purpose, but working with them to make sure that what we deliver meets their needs and their issues. And when we consider urbanization and the range of different cities that we have, there's a lot of different challenges and needs as well. And that brings a lot of complexity from the data. So when we're working with our partners, we talk a lot about data trilemma. And what we often see is, A, not enough data. So whether that's actually access to the data or it's very fragmented quite often, not enough in terms of quality of data. And then it's actually the integration of that data, getting it to speak together. You think about an urban environment, particularly, say, a coastal city, and the amount of information you need and how you get that to come together and work with your stakeholders who all have very different perceptions as well to make it meet their needs. And so that's really where we come into play. And when I consider that, it's really a socio-economical and technological challenge. So I think to answer your question in terms of solutions, the obvious ones with technology is really how do we get better resolution data? And we see a lot of innovation with that driving through. But that really then feeds into the economical aspects. Innovation, we have a lot of smart people. We will be able to develop technology solutions. We're already seeing it happening. But we can't make it happen quick enough if we don't have the funds. And that's, I think, very appropriate given the COP that we're at the moment. But then you come to the socio aspect of it, and I think that's really where the biggest solutions can come into play. The democratization of data, making it accessible and on platforms as well that are easier to be able to house data in a much more effective way, and sharing that and being able to analyze it and visualize it in a much more better way for various different stakeholders is really where I think we're going to see a lot of change coming. And we're already having those discussions really about democratization. And it also comes into accessibility when you consider, we heard earlier, poor communities who often don't have access to it, but also very remote rural communities. So that improvement in technology and giving access to it, but also policy, again, coming together, sharing, and I see on the screen, caring, sharing, and daring. And that's really what's important is how do we make data accessible to everyone?
Thank Thank you very much for that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We do have a lot of data, and a lot of data is needed, but it's also depending on how we are able to use it. And exactly what you were saying around the affordability and the capacity to have access to this solution and the financing that has to go into that to make sure that everyone can properly use this information in a meaningful manner is particularly important. You also talked about democratization of this solution and democratization of this data. So maybe, Siir, I would like to go back to you. When we are talking about ensuring that urban transition are happening, one of the essential points is to make sure that this transition are leaving no one behind, of course. And thinking about what we need to ensure that make sure that urban transitions are not only affordable, but also inclusive, and they keep into account all the different parts of our society. What new research and innovation opportunities do you think they should be prioritized? And what is the existing solution do you think they should be scaled to ensure that that process is happening in a meaningful manner?
Very important question and very important viewpoint to really mainstream into all of decision making, Giorgia. Thank you for the question. So let me emphasize that we are starting to see the benefits of these urban priorities and agendas. And a synthesis of key findings is leading to important progress for the net zero, resilient, and people-centered cities, making sure no one is left behind, everyone is on board. So city networks are now releasing, I'm very glad to absorb, a climate action guide for urban planners, emphasizing also urban planning as a solution, including for compact cities, polycentric cities, and proximity, mode shifting and transit-oriented development, sustainable buildings, nature, informal settlements, and climate impacts. And all of these also underline that cities are really the vanguards of ambitious climate action that contribute to sustainable development, and there are many opportunities forward. A top city network, for example, in their 150 signatories, they observed that about 68,500 years of human life were saved due to better air quality. And also we are seeing that the 13,500 plus cities representing 1.25 billion people in the top city network is also providing real promise for supporting an actionable special report on climate change in cities, where we need to look into how climate mitigation and sustainable development go hand in hand. So we are looking forward to scalable solutions also with the co-benefits and going far together. Giorgia, you also asked about the R&D priorities. Yeah. So let me come to that. When I absorb and look into the Global Research and Action Agenda and the City Research and Innovation Agenda that has now been merged and updated, there are important research and innovation opportunities to empower the local engagement and empower the cities. So for example, policy supporting strategies to enhance participation in energy transitions, equitable, reliable access, sustainable, and sufficient use of resources are underlined, ensuring that all communities benefit from the changes within sustainable decarbonization trajectories. Policies supporting renewable energy in urban systems and sustainable urban mobility solutions are emphasized. New models for community energy that can address energy and transport poverty, fairness in sharing energy among prosumers, enabling electricity access, and energy security while mitigating. All of these are very promising. When I look into this and also compare, for example, one of our major findings was that by 2030, there's a large potential within renewable energy, particularly wind and solar, each with a potential about 4 gigatons CO2 equivalent per year. And these are cost-effective, and part of the potential is also below the reference, what it's replacing. So all of this I see, addressing energy poverty, transport poverty, leaving no one behind, and making them have access to cleaner energy and increasing their well-being. I think this is a very important priority that can be increased in the future. There are a lot of cities out there piloting new initiatives, and it's possible to absorb and see the action out there even more, and how they're in this interconnected world of urban systems and making it real for the people while providing co-benefits, I think is a real opportunity forward.
Thank you very much for that. And if I may, I'd like to add one additional, unfortunately, poverty. You talked about energy poverty, transport poverty, but also cooling poverty. Yes. It seems like increasingly a lot of our communities across the world are not only feeling the heat, but they are also not able to pay the bill to make sure that they can keep cool or to afford technologies that can help them in that direction. So I think you really hit the nail on the head on the important element that brings this transition forward in that direction too. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thinking about people, then I would like to go back to you, Sayyara, Deputy Mayor Musayeva. I want to ask you, when you talk to the people in your city about the transition, you talk about, we joined the urban transition mission. This is what we are trying to do. We are trying to become net zero. We're trying to become resilient and inclusive. How do you communicate that to your own citizens? And how do you ensure that whatever you are planning is really connected and benefiting them directly so that they can join in this very difficult but also important effort?
Thank you. In Sheki, heat waves have increased 41 times in recent decades, and making it Azerbaijan's most climate-affected region and clearly demonstrating the urgent need for climate action. To address this and engage our community, we have implemented several strategies. First one is education and awareness. We organize energy days for school children with support from Covenant of Mayors. For instance, we integrated an energy day into our city festival. However, we continually working to enhance the impact of these events. Showcasing local benefits, we highlighted tangible improvements like our park irrigation system, aiming to demonstrate direct benefits to citizens. Inclusive decision-making, we involve citizens in planning and exploring digital platforms to increase participation. And emphasizing immediate impacts, we communicate benefits like improved air quality while working on better qualification methods. We are working on maintaining long-term project momentum and exploring new initiatives like impact tracking apps and green incentives. Our goal is to enhance Sheki's climate resilience through continuous adaptation plans.
Thank you very much. And I understand that all of your community is really not only feeling the connection with the cultural heritage that you have, but also with the biodiversity, the environment, and the green that is around it. So I think making them aware of the policies and engaging them in these important projects is definitely very important. I'm checking if we have our connection back and if Birgit can hear us.
Yes.
Yes, Birgit, hello. So nice to see you. I think Wi-Fi is getting tired as well after about a week and a half year of negotiations, but it's great to have you with us. So Birgit, for you to know, we are here, we are discussing, of course, the great tall order that having integrated urban transition is, but also these amazing solutions that are available out there. And maybe for you, Birgit, I would like to ask in particular, what do you think is the role of information and how can we make sure that through accessing the right data, we are able to somehow navigate the challenges that these integrated transitions are bringing? We've been talking about how to bring together citizens, for example. Can data help us, for example, visualize some of the objectives that we have and maybe have additional buy-in from other stakeholders that we want to bring along in our journey?
Yeah, super. So can you hear me now?
We can hear you well.
Excellent. So unfortunately, I missed, I would say 20 minutes of the conversation, unfortunately. But yeah, hope to get into the right direction. I mean, we are a tech company and we are not the climate experts and no cities as you are. So on our side, we also have a quite ambitious goal to reduce the 1 gigaton CO2 emissions annually by 2030. And we also know that we can only do this together. So I think you've also already talked about some data-driven decisions and how AI plays a role. So of course, AI for us is also key to help accelerate the solution. So, and there I would say 3 buckets. So to provide information or to provide better information, and then to improve the part of prediction and forecasting. And I mean, there it comes all together because these relevant insights we want to support the cities with, and then combined with it with AI, this should like change the game. And some examples also when it comes to the different audiences, like the citizens or the city stakeholders or other government officials. So regarding the point information, for example, we have things like fuel efficient routing. So this is in Google Maps, and it leverages with AI for the user. So every driver in the cities, and we know we have like a lot of very, very car heavy cities also in the UTM network. So every driver can here prevent carbon equivalent emissions with every trip which is done. So this is one point. Another point which we're working with UTM as well on is the Environmental Insights Explorer. And there you can find, for example, tree canopy data. And tree canopy data also combines AI and aerial imagery. We are having to show like shaded areas in the city and to help the cities better understand where to plant more trees or how to reduce heat where you have, for example, heat islands. So these are like two information examples. And regarding forecasting and prediction, as we know, the pollution which is produced by the cities, it's a lot about traffic. And we have one project which is called Green Light, which is about traffic light optimization. And here also AI-based, we want to reduce the stop and go at the traffic lights, which automatically reduces the CO2 emissions. And this is AI working together with the existing infrastructure and the traffic systems of the city, so that city engineers are able to monitor the impact and to really calculate the saved emissions and work with that technology quite easily. And the last example I wanted to mention is flood forecasting, which becomes more and more important. So here we build a global hydrological AI model, and we combine that with public available data sources. So data sources which I would say all of you are having. And here we are able to predict floods up to 7 days in advance. And this is also something which is available on the Flood Hub platform we are offering for around 80 countries. And it's like coming back to the point of combining and getting the conversation a little bit more fluent between companies like us and the cities. I think so. We bring the data, we bring the AI and the technology, and we need you, so the UTM cities, and as the mayor said in the beginning, to take it for your urban planning and for your decision making, and this for the long term and for the long term future thinking. So.
Thank you very much for that and for stressing out this has to be a collaborative effort, I would say. The information is only half of the journey. What we do with it is much, much, much important as well. And Talia, I'd like to go to you on that point in particular, because all these amazing solutions, even magic to a certain extent, comes at a cost, right? So there is concern around some of these solutions and how they might have some trade-offs that we have to carefully evaluate. It includes, for example, leaving some of the most vulnerable community potentially behind, but also the carbon footprint that would be generated by, for example, utilizing technologies like AI. So from your point of view, what do you think we should do next to start to really address these concerns while we are advancing the opportunities that these technologies are bringing?
No, you're absolutely right. And as I said earlier, it's not just poor communities, it's also the remote areas as well. that have real challenges with this. And in general, data is changing, but also the access to it, as we've already touched on. The communications powers and the visualization technology is improving massively. And with that, we are also giving greater access to those communities. But it isn't just about, okay, how do we improve technology? It's also about what can you get out of the data that you already have? And that is, so if you are collecting new data, then how do we do it in a smarter way that comes to reducing that footprint? So you're looking at it from a longevity perspective that's going to be more sustainable for those cities. So it's really sitting with them from ground zero, understanding what their challenges are and what their needs are for their future requirements on a city level, and then planning it out appropriately. So not providing technology for technology's sake, but looking at what they're going to get the biggest value and bang for their buck as well. And that's where we hope to reduce those footprint issues. But there's also empowering local communities. So we don't have to just go with the best technology. There's a lot of information out there as well through local capacity and knowledge. How can we tap into that? And how can we help them use that data and bring it to the table to really start planning and making decision making? So data comes in many different formats, and that's what we're here to do. We sit, even though we're a private sector, we sit very independently. And as I said, we like to consider not clients, but partners, how we can work with them, understand what their challenges are, what their needs are, and what access they have, and where we can actually leverage and lobby other sources of information as well for them. So it's cost effective, but it is also giving them, reducing that footprint, as you say.
Thank you very much. And I feel it's also very much, as you mentioned, about empowering local communities to really being able to utilize these solutions and this data for themselves. And Birgit, I'll go back to you on that point. Of course, you mentioned already some of the partnership that you have up and running with the city space to really support also access to actionable insights that they are able to utilize for their own planning. Can you share with us some of the lessons learned from the consultations that you might have had with these partners, with these communities, and if there is any actionable recommendation that can be highlighted?
Yes, of course. So I think we made the best joint experience in Brussels at your Innovation Summit a few weeks ago, where we really heard a lot of cities talking about their challenges, but also working with cities for several years. I think it's also, like just mentioned, there are different like it's different layers of challenges. Like we just heard, like the data access, the lack of data. Then we have data standards, specific things for specific regions like the EU. Then where to store the data, which formats, which are the measurement methods, which are the policies which apply per region. So all this is quite difficult to like build one solution and scale it over the globe because it's so specific in each country. Then of course there's the missing funding, so financing, sometimes expertise. So I think all of these were challenges we heard the last years, and yeah, talking about approaches and possible solutions. And this is also something we heard in the beginning and also in Brussels. Climate planning should be long-term, and it should not stick to a government which is like elected for 4 years, because we just heard that it's not short-term thinking and short-term decisions. So it needs to be built for long-term decision making. So to build long-term frameworks within the government would probably be one of solutions. So this is what we heard a lot. And then the point to collaborate and to learn from each other, which means like knowledge sharing, best practice sharing. So this is really key. And I mean, Giorgia, you are the expert in this, and we are really happy to have a great partnership with you, and we already launched one guide for the cities in October, which focused on impact finance and how to use climate data for funding requests. But I think today is going to be another launch, but I don't want to reveal anything. But we'll probably hear more from you later in the day.
No, thank you very much. And I think maybe this is actually the right moment before we go to the last very speed round of questions to all of my panelists. If I can ask to have the slides back, I'm delighted to take this opportunity to launch today officially the newest guide recommendation that we have been co-developing together, looking into how it is possible to use actionable data for urban planning in particular. So again, asking colleagues if they can please display the slides. This guide has been developed in particular looking for the urban planners' needs, for urban planners dedicated to them, but also developed together with them. We are looking into really leveraging and helping leveraging climate data and insights across different stages of the urban planning process, from discovery to assessment planning to implementation up until monitoring, learning from specific lessons learned from practitioners across the world. You can see a few cities there listed: Renka, Puerto Montt from Chile, Miami-Dade from the US, Cascais, Antalya from Turkey. So really a broad spectrum of communities across the world that have been delving into aspects related to how to use insights, data across data set to bring together decisions that are informed by transportation data insights, buildings emission insights, and solar potential in particular. So I am really excited to launch officially this guide today, and I invite all of you to have a look on how these guidelines can support really trying to solve pressing urban planning challenges that our cities are seeing across the world. So I will put back the QR, and it's a good reading. I know some of us have a very long flight back. This is not even that long of a guide, so please do download it and make sure that you let us know also what your thoughts are, and if there is anything else that we should delve into. And this is actually a nice segue to my last question to all of you. Birgit, also please get ready. We've been talking about what the core challenges are, the core opportunities are. You painted a perfect picture of that. We've been talking about the issue around making the transition happen, so the political commitment, the integrated approaches. We've been talking about some of the solutions that are already available out there, and even how we can make sure that the trade-offs are balanced with the co-benefits that we can get from this solution. So I would like to ask to each one of you, what is the gap now that we have to address next? Because we're talking about also innovation priorities for the future. So Siir, if you had to pick one, what do you think we should focus on?
That one selection would be how to come to that point of net zero in cities, and how to come to that decarbonized and climate resilient future for cities. All cities are different, but it's a shared goal. And what we need to really look into is that we, together with cities, everyone, we will determine, we're in charge of our climate future. We will determine our climate future. And the extent of what we do, the pace of how we do it, will determine where we stand. If I may use and represent the voice of our mayor from Mozambique, who was here earlier in the session, climate can vote also. If we look into the livelihoods, and the impacts that are happening to the ecosystems, to the people, to the world, this will, it's a very, it's questionable. The actions that we're taking now, and are they really sustainable? And it's really an unsustainable path that we're going for. So I would like to reiterate that we, cities, and everyone, the society, we will determine, we're in charge of our climate future, and we will determine where we stand. Thank you.
So the gap there is to make sure that everyone takes ownership of this process and contributes to it directly. Sayyara, can I ask the same question to you? You can even be, realistic, of course. What is the one gap that you think we should address as the first and foremost priority?
Actually, thank you this question. We have gaps, but at this moment, I want to say that I hope this collaboration will help to my community, to my city, but also to our world. Actually, I also join Ms. Siir's opinions. Maybe we need more conversation about that.
More conversation, more collaboration, more knowledge sharing to come to how we can solve these issues together. So thank you very much for that. Talia, what is your one bucket list or desire or your your wish list, top one?
It's probably a slightly different one to the first two, but I think we need to start putting science at the core of decision making. To come back to the examples that were given by Mayor Manuel with the mangroves, how can we help work with governments and multiple different stakeholders and allow them to be able to make the right decision, which actually has political and economic influence as well through the power of science? So yes, making decisions and making that driven through science input.
Thank you very much for that and for highlighting the importance of the role of science in giving us the right direction. Birgit.
So for me, it's a little bit the combination of what we heard. So on one side is the collaboration, not only the collaboration with, I would say, data providers like us and the cities. It's also the collaboration within the cities, which we recognize it's not always working smoothly. So there's the climate ministry and transportation, and sometimes when we meet them, they see each other the first time. So I think collaboration within cities is extremely important when working on climate planning, and then the trust in data and the trust to make data-driven decisions. As we just heard, I think this is another important point which combines with the collaboration.
Thank you very much. We are at time for this very exciting and also, I would say, meaningful conversation that we were having. So I take it that we are indeed in charge of our climate future, but we can't make that climate future happen unless we work together on this. So the value of partnership is not just to bringing us all on the same page, but also to make sure that we are leveraging information, data, that we set our course on the basis of science, and to ensure that we can, through that and through our partnership, also build trust in the future that we want to create together. A big round of applause to these amazing panelists, please. And also to the audience. I know it's 8 p.m., so I am really thankful and grateful, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation together with us tonight. Thank you very much once again.